Welcome, everyone. My name's Kate Weaver Patterson. I am one of the hosts today, and we are so delighted that you are here. I could talk for 30 minutes about why I'm here and feel like this is so critical, but you did not come here to hear from me. I will just say, as the mother of 3 children, as someone who works with nonprofits, as someone who has a husband in the US Air Force, it has never been more important that we stand up for what we believe in and that we show ourselves and everyone around us what America truly can be. So thank you for being here to help us make that movement happen. And I am going to turn it over to my co-host, Lynne. Thanks.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Lynne Trojahn, and I'm the founder and CEO of Thrive Consulting. And I've been a volunteer with Blue CD2 New Mexico since May of 2022. And so this is a fundraising event, and I really want to thank you all. You've already contributed. You've already made a big difference. You've had us be at 13,000 of our $15,000 goal for this time today, and we're giving thank you so much. And this all really makes a difference in terms of not only what happens in Congressional District 2 in New Mexico with Gabe Vasquez, and an amazingly third time we're going to have him reelected in 2026. But now we're taking this show on the road. And 7 states want our technology. They want to know how to fundraise. They want to know about data. They want to know about marketing. They want to know about PR and our messaging that has had so many reluctant voters, those who normally don't vote or have registered and haven't voted before, getting them out to vote. And we know how important that is. I'm a proud native New Mexican. And I come from a long line of Democrats and immigrants in my family. And my uncle was actually a representative, and he was in the legislature for Moore and Harding County in northern New Mexico. I'm a joyous fundraiser. I love inviting people to contribute money. And so I will be doing that at the end, and please stay to the end. But you already have given, and thank you so much for that. But I'm also a wife. My husband Craig is here. I'm a mom, and I'm a grandmother to a 4-year-old granddaughter. And my daughter at 34, my granddaughter at 4, have so many fewer opportunities than even I did growing up. And we don't want women's rights and everything that is about what it makes a difference for each of us to go back to the 50s or whenever, MAGA thinks it was a good idea. We want everything and more than we've always achieved. So I love to fundraise for Blue CD2 because it makes a huge impact. You get a big bang for your contribution dollar. Most super PACs, it costs about $200 per vote. With Blue CD2 New Mexico, it's $8 per vote. You're going to hear some of this again, and you can applause. That's incredible, right? Yeah. So many votes, $8 per vote. So again, I want to thank you for your generosity as we take this model up to, on the road. It's been really curvy. We've hit some yuccas. A couple of tumbleweeds have gotten in front of our eyes, and kind of veered us off the road. But we're being innovative, and with innovation, these curves and, being kind of like a roller coaster happen. Thank you for being with us on this ride and making sure that 7 other states have this technology. We have Simon here, and we have Rachel Bitecofer here, our 2 keynote speakers who it's incredible to have these 2 in one room, and I'll be introducing them. And Simon, since you're here from Santa Fe, but by Washington, D.C., we were going to have you speak at 2. Is that still possible? Awesome. So I'd like to introduce Rochelle and Constance. And Rochelle is our co-founder for Blue CD2 New Mexico. Constance is our marketing and messaging guru with Blue CD2. And the 2 of them together as retirees said, hell no, we're not going to have Yvette Harrell again as the person representing Congressional District 2. And so, you know, as Rachel says, they've been fighting fire with fire. We're part of the resistance. And so these intrepid, courageous, always fighting women are going to tell you about Blue CD2 New Mexico.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I'm a bit under the weather, so please just bear with me. I was so excited about showing you what we've done with your dollars, but that's going to be up to Constance. So we hand off frequently. I just want to say a little bit about the origin story that Lynne just mentioned. In March of 2021, a group got together so outraged at the undemocratic and truly un-American policies and ideas and platforms of Yvette Harrell, who had just been elected to my district. And yeah, we said, hell no. And we have built this nimble organization to fight back, to push back, to say, this is what we believe in, transformative change. And that is what you are funding. And we're going to show you in detail how we spend your dollars and what that transformative change looks like. And I just want to say especially how grateful I am to Rachel and to Simon. Rachel was at our very first fundraiser where we raised $3,000. I mean, we started from nothing. And Simon has helped us with 3 fundraisers so far, and this is the 4th. So we are very indebted to your courage, your example, and your help. And all of us together have built something remarkable, and we are creating remarkable change in a district that is really quite historically red, and we are changing that. So thank you again.
And I'd also like to thank you for coming. And it is wonderful to have 2 of our leading lights in this room with Simon and Rachel both blowing us away. You may notice on your table there is a QR code. If you are suddenly stricken with a desire to give us some more money, all you need to do is scan that QR code that's about this big right on your table. So feel free. So I'm Constance Mussells, and I moved to New Mexico about 6 years ago and fell into Blue CD2 basically. And I'm now the co-chair with Rochelle. So let's get started. Let's see. Okay, our mission is to keep Democrat Gabe Vasquez in New Mexico Congressional District 2 and to support Democrats up and down the ballot. And you can see this District 2 is quite a sizable district. It's the yellow one there on the bottom. All right, so let's move on. So how do we work? Well, our strategy is, it's basic marketing. Keep touching people over and over and over again. So when we're doing something, we blend our tactics and messages. So our infrequent voter audience, and that's who we're after, we can reach them in ways they like to be reached. And actually this year, we are running a postcard campaign, and we are testing all the different cohorts that we have to see what they like best, and trying out all the different modalities such as postcards and programmatic advertising and texting. So by the time we hit 2026, we plan to be on the ground in January, ready to go. We use postcards, social media advertising. We have an amazing website. We have billboards. Last fall, we had 13 billboards in the district. We use radio. We use programmatic advertising, which I'll talk a bit more about later, and texting to reach these folks. So Diane Denish, who I hope is here somewhere, our New Mexico's first woman lieutenant governor, yay, said this about Blue CD2. One reason Blue CD2 is so important is that it's changed the strategy of how we, Democrats, operate in CD2. Win a race, take a bow, then wait for the next race to come along and kick into gear. You just can't do that anymore. There was a low voter turnout in the district in 2022, but is that better? Sorry, it's hard to read this, but there are Democrats out there waiting to hear from us. So we found this out ourselves last fall when we started advertising around Silver City and Carlsbad and some of those places that never hear from Democrats. Democrats out there are waiting to hear from us one-on-one. We need a narrowcast message versus a broadcast, which is what Blue CD2 does. It uses your money and does a lot with a little. So what did our donors fund in 2024? 365,000 postcards, 260,000 digital programmatic ads, 13 billboards, posts and location ads on social media on a daily and weekly basis. We had a social media influencer named Jenny Buckley, who was fantastic, and gave us one post per week for 8 weeks. We delivered over 300,000 texts. We ran radio spots for 2 weeks, which is unfortunately, this district is either in the El Paso, our district is either in El Paso market or Albuquerque market, neither of which is cheap. So we have to be careful with our radio. And we had over 85,000 website views. So our secret sauce for infrequent voters is starting with data analytics. We find the people we want to touch. Then we do tested messaging. It's carefully crafted, nationally tested messaging. We use marketing using as many channels as we can think of to reach our voters. And we repeat over and over and over again. We are continually in touch with our voters, year in, year out. We don't go off the rails on an off year. We are still there. They're still hearing from us. Our website is the center of action. We try to make sure it has reliable information and projects our values and our vision. It's year-round, it's localized, and it's relevant. What I'm showing you now is actually not up on the website anymore, but it's what we developed last year. We called it our Good News campaign. And we drove everybody to the website. So we started with this map, and if you see there's little orange dots on the part that's yellow, well, that's a dot. If you click on that dot on our map, it would take you to a subpage for that particular county, because we wanted to show people what Democrats were doing for them right here in River City. So, for example, if you click on Doña Ana, you will get Doña Ana County, and then you will get drop-down menu from that about what happened in Doña Ana County and what was so good about it. For example, in this case, clean transit buses. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what we did in 2024 to give you an idea of the scope of what we are actually doing. In the spring, we started with the Good News campaign. I spoke about that. In the summer and fall, we did a voter registration campaign. In the fall, we did a Get Out the Vote, and we're always after infrequent voters. And then we did a test, which turned out to be very interesting, with centrist independents. So our Good News campaign was 60,000 postcards that we sent to 20,000 infrequent voters. And then we, over that course of time, we contacted 20,000 people during the campaign, and 29% of them went to the website. Now, this is from people who, they have lives. They're usually young, they have families, they do all these, they have plenty of things to keep them occupied. So to get 29% of infrequent voters to visit your website is not bad. In the summer, we did a Register to Vote campaign, and we did it in what we call Spanglish, half English and half Spanish, which was quite well received. We did 6 cards to 15,000 people, which totals 90,000 cards. And 29% of the postcard recipients. These are different people. These are people who have to register now. So we're not talking the infrequent voters who are already registered. 4,300 of those came to our registered vote page on our website. And then we did a get out the vote campaign. So the people heard from us in the spring, heard from us again in the fall. And we also included anybody that we could find that had registered that fell into that category of infrequent. For that, we sent out 3 postcards. There were 90,000 postcards, and we went to 30,000 people. And they're all about voting for Gabe, because that's our message. We're coming up to the election, of course. We also did programmatic advertising. I said I would tell you about this. This is advertising that's animated like you see. And if you, for example, I like to do jigsaw puzzles on my phone occasionally at night. Or you might want to read a recipe or watch a sports program, you will see at the bottom of your phone a little ad, because that's how they kind of squeeze it in when you're viewing something that's free. And we work with a group called Foundation Blue Media, which can, in addition to locating these people, they can locate the person we're after by their street address. So we know we're reaching the people we're after with these ads, and they get served up, all different ones. That Sex Could End one was one of the best ads we ever ran. You can imagine why. I'll tell you a little bit more about that too in a minute. And then we also did some other things, and that you can see an example of one of the 13 billboards. We did 30,000 texts. We did radio advertising, and I've said all this before, but we had 8 weeks of TikTok influencer with 58,000 followers in New Mexico. So what happened? Well, in the fall, of the 40,000 infrequent voters that we touched, more than 22,000 voted, and Gabe Vasquez won by over 11,000 votes. So that was pretty good. Is that interesting campaign I was talking about? We had some money left over, believe it or not. We managed to scrounge up, I don't know, about $4 or $5 grand, I think it was. And we decided we would see what would happen if we reached out to people that don't meet our predilection criteria. We often will, when we're talking to our reluctant voters, we like to know that they're Democrats. We like to know that they have interest over a certain percentage in different areas. For example, somebody's interested in the environment, somebody's interested in women's rights. We like it to be over 60%. But with this group, these are not people that we ever talk to. And we try to find people who are centrist, but might go either way. And what we ended up with was about 7,000 people that we were able to identify. And we ran what we call the Imagine campaign. And we asked people to imagine what would happen if more tax cuts for the ultra wealthy happened, no overtime pay, government monitored pregnancies, no coverage for pre-existing conditions. All these things could affect you, but we try to do this in a way that would not turn somebody off, would not say you're a bad person because you think about you'll vote for Trump. We try to say we all have things in common. And so we sent that to, as I said earlier, 7,000 people, and 34% of that audience, 34% went to our site. And then we know that 46% of them went on and voted. Okay, so this is what Foundation Blue Media had to say about this. Normally when we figure out how well our programmatic ads are doing, if they get more than a 2%, 0.02% response, that's considered successful. And you can see, in one case we had, and that was the sex ad, we had 60 times greater than a successful response rate. And most of our stuff was well over it. So what we've been doing and how we're doing it does seem to resonate with those people out there in Southern New Mexico. And that is because we have the correct data and the correct messaging and the right way to reach them all. So what do we do with data? Data is a core part of what we do. We use it to select our target audiences. We use it to track our campaigns, metrics and responses. We use it to monitor and respond to voter turnout. And we use it to inform what we do. David presents this again. We use it to inform what we do for future campaigns. So we try to take what we did in 2022 and learn from it, 2024 and learn from it. And it's been very, very useful. And we have, I think, made a lot of gains in the terms of the way that we now know how to reach our audience. So the question, did we move the dial in 2022 and 2024? Well, in 2022, Gabe won by 1,346 votes, and almost 7,000 of the 40,000 target population we went after in 2022 voted. In 2024, Gabe won by 11,000 and change. And of the 40,000 people we touched in 2024, 22,000 voted. We consider ourselves to be highly effective in the use of your dollars. First of all, we're a group of professionals who all volunteer. We don't have any overhead. It costs us $6 to get a reluctant voter to the polls and $18 to register a new voter. And according to Focus for Democracy, the average cost is about $200 and go higher. Okay, let's see. So what are we doing in 2025? Well, we have a new campaign. It's called Let's Fix It. And for this, we're going to be running 5 postcards, billboards, programmatic ads, texting, media, PR, and so forth. And it's now running. And we have a budget right now of $100,000, and we have so far raised $42,000 to date. But when you see the thing on the left, on the right there, that's the landing page you go to, and it tells you different ways you can fix things, like vote, show up for, show up for rallies, talk to your neighbors, do all sorts of things that really help us get to the finish line, because in 2026, we really want to win and take back the House. So, for example, these are some of the other things we're doing. That's a billboard you see that we're running. And we've had several people say good things about us, including our friend, Mr. Rosenberg, who's here. But I want to talk about David Callahan briefly, because he runs a group called Blue. Oh, great. It's a governor advised fund for Democratic donors. And he says that we're totally unique. There's no other organization that's solely focused on winning a specific district. That kind of focus can have a major impact on a close race. And its approach offers a model for other districts across the country. And Simon says, this is an amazing organization. I'm so impressed with everything you've done. You're operating at a much higher level than other groups around the country. Blue CD2 is arguably the most organized, most impactful with the money that gets raised than any organization I've worked with. So, plans for 2025. In addition to, of course, backing Gabe again for his third term in office, we're also sharing our model on how to flip a red congressional district with groups in other states. And we've had a ton of interest in this. So we are creating an instruction manual on covering these topics. And here's an example of what it looks like. But you can see it's really nice. It's an interactive PDF. We have all kinds of different categories, including data, fundraising, marketing, and communications, and messaging. So we are hopefully on our way to reaching out and helping other groups similar to ours to do the similar kinds of things that we're doing and flip some districts. Yeah. So just reminding you about that QR code that's lying on your table. And also, I believe you folks online are seeing some links to our Act Blue site. So please feel free to contribute, because the more we get, the better off we're going to be. And I think that is, thank you.
Great job.
Question?
No, we don't. So thanks. Yeah. You can just leave it here. Should you just leave it here? Constance, we just want to leave it here. Okay. Great. Thanks. This was first our first in-person event since we've gotten started with Blue CD2 New Mexico. And then having Simon come, we wanted to open it up, and a lot of his people and our people are online as well. So this hybrid is like one of those tumbleweeds in the windshield. And thank you so much for Constance and Rochelle. And isn't this an amazing, badass group of women who have made this happen? Yes. And for the volunteers who are here, do you mind standing up? Marty, Leora, everybody, Kate, Ellen, everybody who's a volunteer with Blue CD2 New Mexico. Thank you for volunteering. And I would have all of you stand up, but I won't yet, but you've all contributed as well to be here, so thank you. So now I have the honor of being able to introduce Simon Rosenberg, who's a highly regarded political strategist and commentator with more than 30 years of experience in national politics and television news. He has built a home for his political analysis, commentary, and live political discussions at Hopium Chronicles on the Substack media platform. He is a frequent commentator on cable news, in national newspapers and magazines, and on leading podcasts. Simon is also married to a native New Mexican, and her family is a Jewish ranching family, like my family. Oftentimes that's an oxymoron, Jewish ranching family, but not in New Mexico. We're pioneering Jews. And there is a book named Pioneering Jews. The other weird Albuquerque, small but quirky thing about Simon is that his father-in-law owned a beautiful Victorian building off of Lomas that my mom had her first therapy practice at. So we know the family well. So Simon, come on up, and we're really excited to have you here and to meet you in person since I've been online with you. Yeah, that's not great. Thank you. Do you need anything to drink?
No,
or-
I got
Good?
water, yeah. It's twist my arm to help people in New Mexico. My wife, Deborah, good to see you. My wife grew up here in Albuquerque and went to St. Pius High School. And we were married in Santa Fe. And my in-laws lived in Albuquerque for a long time and now are in Santa Fe. So I'm out here just to see family. And my oldest son's 25th birthday is tomorrow. And I made a decision to spend the day with him rather than come to the Indivisible conference. And so I feel bad about that, but it was the right thing to do. As you all know, you don't get to spend time with your kids once they go, right? Any moment you get to spend with them is a blessing. And so this is my one stop here. Rachel, great to see you. I know I'm I'm glad you're here. I don't get to see you in person very often. And I also just want to acknowledge Deborah Potter, who's here, who has been, yes. Deborah has been a Hopium exemplar. We have this project in the Hopium community called the Resolutions Project, which is the idea was to mimic the work of our founders, who in the run-up to the Declaration of Independence, there was an effort over a long period of time to bring the injuries, abuses, and usurpations, as was mentioned in the declaration, to towns in the colonies to help them develop their understanding about how to critique Mad King George and to spread the revolutionary spirit through resolutions that were done in towns all across the colonies. Well, we kicked that idea around in the Hopium Chronicles community, and Deborah was the first one to run with it, and she passed, along with Paul and others who are here, resolutions of against the abandonment of the constitutional order by Donald Trump and his cronies in both Bernalillo County and Santa Fe County. And there is another one that's been introduced in Dona Ana County, which is in CD2, right? And Las Cruces. And so their work inspired others. And we now have resolutions like this, 63 resolutions now moving in 20 states. It just passed the Boston City Council a few weeks ago, moving throughout California, the Northeast, all across the country. So I just want to thank Deborah for her leadership and her great work, and Paul as well. And yesterday my main email from Hopium was a interview that I did with Deborah and Rachel Polliner from Boston, where they talked about their experiences in doing this. So not only is Blue CD2 New Mexico a pioneer and a leader in this new effort to challenge MAGA, but so is Deborah. And so it's great to have her here. I want to thank Lynne and Kate and Ellen and Constance and Rochelle. Listen, this is an amazing organization. And I think what's interesting about what you saw in the presentation was this focus on infrequent voters. Well, what was now when we look back at the 2024 election, right? What was the big thing that we kind of didn't do very well is we didn't focus well on infrequent voters. And this organization was a little ahead of the curve, right? And so I want to applaud them for their very determined and important work. And I'm always reminded when I'm with you that I need to do more to make sure that people around the country know what you're doing. And so let me help with your effort to go reach out to other congressional districts and what will be a really important election. I'm only going to speak for a little bit about the current moment, and I'd rather take questions because I want to hear from you. And also there's just so much. I mean, one of the things I've been writing about is that in Washington and in the European capitals, August is a very sleepy month. And, you know, in Washington, people work very hard all year round. And then August comes and the place just shuts down. People go back to their districts and there's sort of a lull and a pause. And the same thing, as all of you know, who've traveled to Europe, the same thing is true in Europe. And look where we are in August. Every day, our leader, and I don't call him a president because he actually doesn't aspire to be one, is every day our leader is somehow throwing himself at us in ways that are making us deal with his presence every day. We are now in August 22nd, right? He hasn't taken a vacation. There's been no rest. We're all sort of dealing with this maniacal need he has to be reaching us every day, to make himself the center of attention in the whole world every single day. And to me, the idea that we're still here and he's still producing these sort of spectacles every day in deep late August, and there's been no let up, and somehow speaks to him and about his whole, what's the right word to use? About his illness. I mean, no, it's worse than that, right? Is that I think he's mad, right? I think that he is unhinged and that he is no longer, his feet are no longer on the ground. And that part of the way I talk about this at Hopium is that I think that there are two things happening simultaneously now in the country that we have to sort of allow both of them to be true at the same time. The first is that Trump is doing enormous damage to the country and to the world, and that it is escalating and getting worse. This month was a bad month for democracy in America, and that we have to work with incredible vigor every day to try to mitigate the damage and to win back power in order to do what we need to do, which is to give our kids and our grandkids the kind of opportunities that we all had, right? I mean, what motivates me so much in the work that I do 7 days a week now for years and years, is I think about my 3 kids and that the kind of world they're going to inherit now, and that I'm highly motivated to do everything I can to make sure that they have the same kind of opportunities that I had, which I don't know is going to be the case any longer. But the second thing that's also true at the same time is that I think our movement is getting stronger. I think that for all the sense that we came out of the box pretty slow earlier this year, and I'm sure that Rachel's going to have something to say about this, is that I think that we are increasingly coming to understand what's required of us now. It may have been slow, and it may have been, and we may have been unprepared. But I think this month, as much as this month was a month of escalation for Trump, right? And let me just go through this so we all understand, because I thought we were going to have a slow month, is that Trump imposed these tariffs on the world, doubling and tripling the tariff rates, illegal, unconstitutional, the greatest abuse of power, in my view, in American history, without congressional assent. Just woke up one day and got it all done on August 4th, I think it was. The city that I've lived in for 33 years and where I raised my kids is now under military occupation. And it's getting worse and worse as they are being pressured to produce videos and outcomes of their kicking the crap out of brown and black people in the streets of DC. We've also seen just John Bolton's house was raided this morning by the FBI, a dramatic escalation of their intimidation and of their political opponents. Trump claimed he didn't know anything about it, right, in a press thing today. Trump, by the way, Bolton was a very, very visible critic over the last week of Trump's bending the knee to Putin last Friday in Alaska and giving the backhand to our European allies. There was probably nobody more vocal on television over those few days than John Bolton. And so John Bolton is not only a big critic of Donald Trump's, he's a very big critic of Vladimir Putin's. Donnie's really good buddy. And so now the FBI was sent and raided his home this morning in Maryland. There's been an escalation. And I think this escalation is driven in part by the second truth that we have to keep in our mind, is that Trump is weakening. The public has rejected him. It's very clear now that 52, 53, 54% of the country has written him off, that are unavailable to him. You know, I look at this period since early June when things really began to change, because in early June, Donald Trump's poll numbers were coming back up. You could tell they were feeling pretty good about where things were going. And then Elon, right, spent 3 days just trashing Trump on Twitter. And I think this caused injury to Trump. I think this caused his buddy Elon, the richest man in the world, this guy that he had cultivated, had all of a sudden turned on him and even expressed desire for him to be replaced as president, right, with J.D. Vance. And I think this was a huge disturbance in the Trumpian force, right? And I think it was narcissistic injury, whatever you want to call it. And within a few hours of the final sets of tweets that Elon did, we had this dramatic escalation in Los Angeles. And I think that for the last 10 weeks, you've seen Trump, like I use the line as like the book, Are You My Mother? Donald Trump has been running around trying to find ways to restore his strength and his power, his virility and his manhood that was taken away from the attacks by Elon on him. And I think that he began to feel weak and powerless instead of strong and powerful. And so you've seen these series of escalations that have happened, right? He did the LA, he brought in the military and the Marines in Los Angeles. He then bombed Iran. He then passed his big ugly bill, which was the most unpopular major piece of legislation in modern times. And he's been continuing to try to do these things that I think are fundamentally about restoring this sense of power and strength when it's ebbing for him. He's aging. He was diagnosed with a major illness, right, just a few months ago. His big fat ankles, right, that we see on TV. He's not walking very well any longer. He is the oldest man to ever be elected president in our history. And the country has rejected all of these escalations that he did. In every case, the majority of the country turned on him and rejected it. And so I think that part of what's driving all of this is this sense that his powers are ebbing, that he isn't as in control, and that he's having these desperate, maniacal, over-the-top, crazy efforts to try to reestablish strength and control. And that we're in this dual fight, right, between his escalation and our continuing to degrade him and to weaken him, which is what we must do. And you know, the old line Robert Frost had is the best way through. Am I getting this right? I don't say this very often. The best way out is through, right? And I think that we have to recognize that we're in it now, right? We are in. I think August has been a bad month for all of us and for the country, and that Congress is going to return to a very different city and to a very different set of politics. On one hand, his escalation. On the second hand, Democrats beginning to step into their own power. And I think you've seen this now led by the Texas Democrats, by J.B. Pritzker, by Gavin Newsom, that we're beginning to find new ways to find a higher gear and to escalate ourselves, right, in order to fight back against the escalations of Trump. And I think this has been a very important month. And I think when Congress comes back in 10 days, they're going to be returning to a completely different kind of politics. And I hope that the lesson that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the leaders of the Democrats in Congress are taking is that they need to learn from what Gavin Newsom's been doing, right? They need to understand that there's only, and Rachel will know more about this. There's an old Churchill line about there's only the fight, right? And if you know it, will you say it when you come up here? Yeah. Okay, you can use both. How about we do both? Is that we have to fight, right? And what all of you are looking for, and what Democrats are looking for all over the country, is they want us to fight. I mean, it's not really that hard, not that complicated. And I think that we've seen a higher gear for Democrats in recent weeks, and I think we should be heartened by that. But I think we also have to sort of level set and recognize that this is going to be very hard. And that as optimistic as we should be about the Virginia races and the New Jersey races, and about for those that have been inspired by this new young man in New York, and we should have good elections, is that Trump is really now pushing the boundaries of in every possible way. I mean, the event with Putin last week was a dark day in American history, right? I mean, he rolled out the red carpet. You remember the video of him looking like a little kid when he was waiting for his buddy Vlad, right, to come greet him. It was disgusting. And I think that so I think it means that the kind of work that you're doing here, the work that we'll all be doing through elections, is we have to do more. And part of doing more is starting earlier, right? I mean, I think that one of the things that we have to get out of our heads is they operate 24/7, 365. Donald Trump is in our face, shoving his stuff down our throat every single day. And, you know, we just took a month off as a national party, right? And I think that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem, in addition to coming back and finding a higher gear, is the leadership has to be operating now 7 days a week, you know, every day of the year in now. And the idea that Trump has done all of this escalation, and the leadership in our party has been basically on recess, not responding, not counterattacking the things that he's done. I'm going to say, I'm being recorded here, whatever. I've been a little surprised, to be honest, that there has been no, that my city that I live in has been occupied, and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries didn't believe that to be a national emergency to come back to DC. And I think that for all of my optimism about us finding this higher gear, I think that we should be demanding much more from our leaders. And it's not just the Republic. It's not just, one of the things we talk about at Hopium is I encourage all of you to call your 2 senators and your congressmen every single day, right? Every day. And because they need to know that we're demanding more from them, right? They need to know that we're paying attention. They pay attention. These calls that go into congressional offices really matter. They really track this stuff. And I give a list of things that people can call on every day. but it has to become part of our routine as big citizens to be calling even our friendlies, right? Even if they're Democrats, to let them know that you're paying attention and that you're giving them ideas about things they can be doing now as we all try to struggle through this unprecedented moment in our history. And so I come today, and I'll open it up for questions, is that I'm both sort of the weight of the Trump presidency is weighing on me very heavy today. And because I think this was a bad month for us. And at the same time, I'm also heartened by what I'm seeing from Gavin Newsom, from J.B. Pritzker, from the Texas Democrats, who are starting to show us new ways to respond to this moment. And I think that what I believe, and the reason I founded Hopium Chronicles 2.5 years ago, is that I still believe that the power of our family is all of you. It's the people in the Democratic Party. It's not our leaders. It's not the consultants, certainly not the consultants. It is all of you. And I think that the only way we're going to get to the other side of this, right, is the way that we're in now, which is that we've got to fight our way through. And I think that the good news is that the elections in the fall look like they're going to deliver us what we need. But we don't have elections for a long time after that. And how are we going to continue to be the counterweight, the bulwark against Trump and what he's doing? And I think we have to recognize that we're not really sure, right? That none of us ever been through anything like this before. And I think that I talk about how part of what's been hard for Americans is that we have this sort of plague of American exceptionalism, right? That we believe that that these kinds of things cannot happen here. That we have been lulled perhaps into a sense of security, false security, by the sense that something like that really couldn't happen in America, that Trump really couldn't actually just unilaterally level tariffs on everybody in the world, that Trump couldn't really occupy the nation's capital with the military, that Trump couldn't really do X, Y, and Z, cut a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted pedophile, among the most significant in American history, that he couldn't really do all these things, but he does. And I think that we are now 7 months into Trumpism, right? We can't be surprised any longer. I mean, we have to be clear-eyed about the challenges we face. And I will just say, for all of you who've been involved in politics, whatever you've done and whatever successes you've had, and and my sort of thing that I look back on is that I was part of the war room in 1992 with Bill Clinton, and that was an incredible experience. Whatever you've done, the most important battles that any of us have ever been involved in are the ones that are ahead of us. And we have no choice other than to fight as hard as we can and win. And we have to do it for the American people. We have to do it for our kids and our grandkids. And we have to do it for the kids and the grandkids of all the people of all the world. Because a world without the light of America is not a world that I want to know. And I think we have to not let that light dim on our watch. And that's why you're here today. That's why this amazing group does all their great work. And I'm really excited now to take some questions. Go. Sorry. I didn't know there's a mic. Thank you for having a mic. And please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Leandra Schuler, and I wanted to talk about a few things that I've learned on Heather Cox Richardson's channel. She did mention a lot of the representatives actually need our help explaining what's happening in our cities, because they're not getting it from anything unless they have them in trial, basically. So one important thing is, if we see anything we don't want to continue, we are going to have to contact our senators. And then the other thing I was going to say with that is, it's very important that we contact our senators, whether they support what we do or do not, because of the marks. They get to see how many constituents actually support what they're doing. And if they don't get very much, they know they can negotiate in that area. So we do want to be conscious of the things we value. The other thing I was going to say is, with the Democratic Party, how do we push our leaders without making people angry at them? Because I don't think, well, I see a lot of frustration with them, but how is that going to benefit us in any of the future elections? I feel like I've heard a lot of strategists complain about the Democratic Party, which is somewhat difficult for me as somebody trying to push our values, to get people to vote for Democrats, because I don't think we can take for granted anyone's vote anymore.
You put a lot on the table.
Yes.
Let me try to address a couple things. So Heather Cox Richardson, if you don't follow her on Substack, she's kind of a must follow, right? And she really is the godmother of Substack. And, you know, I was very much inspired to start my community through her work. I think that this issue that I want to deal with the last part of it first, which is this issue about what we do, how we feel about things and how we express ourselves in public, right? Which are not the same thing. And meaning that I think that the greatest disaster that could happen to our party over the next few years is for us to factionalize and for us to fight with each other as opposed to fight with Trump. And that as much as we may feel frustration with people, and certainly there are people that I feel frustration with, you don't hear that or see that in my writing and my public commentary. What I'm trying to do is to figure out how to move this thing to to take the next hill, to go do the next thing. And I keep my ire and my criticism on them and not on us. And I think that inside the Democratic family in the last 6 months, 9 months, this issue, it's become kind of common or kind of virtue signaling or whatever the words are, to keep the attention on our inadequacies as opposed to the damage they're doing to the country. And I think that we all feel that, but it can't be, to your point, how we express this to the world, because who's ever going to vote for a party if the people who are part of it thinks that party sucks, right? It's a recipe for Trump being in office or wherever he is. I don't know if it's in office anymore, right? Or in the White House for a long time. And I think that the sort of the frustration that we have is to be expected. The fear and worry we have about our country is to be expected. The question is, what are you going to do about it? And as much as we possibly can with organizations like this one and in the stuff that I recommend at Hopium, Rachel's going to be talking about stuff today, we have to channel our anxiety into concrete action to move things forward, whether it's supporting candidates. If you want to make phone calls into New Jersey and Virginia now, you can do that. If you want to write postcards into those races, but try as much as possible to be a cheerleader and not a critic. Because there are people that are really good at attacking Democrats and they're called Republicans, and we don't really need to help them in this. And when you pit Democrats against each other, right, you're doing MAGA's work for them. Because what MAGA wants more than anything else, and we know this throughout all of history, whether it was in Germany, right, or you go through whatever historical example you want, the way that this kind of regime consolidates is if the opposition splits, right? And so those voices in your networks and in your communities and in your family who want to take not what they're feeling and what they believe, but to take the energy that they have and turn it into attacks on each other as opposed to them, I would not follow those voices, to be honest. I think those voices are leading us astray as much as it is understandable, right? Like, I think that's the point I want to make, is that we all have this frustration, this sense that this country that we grew up in is slipping away. And there is, I think, to be honest, right, there's something tragic and sad, right, about what's happening now. And I think we have to feel our feelings, right, and let that be, but also then use those and turn it into relentless and ferocious work on behalf of our democracy. I mean, part of what we try to do at Hopium is create more avenues for people to do this kind of constructive work, like the work that Deborah's been doing that's now being matched all across the country. And then the second thing is, yes, they're louder than we are. And we need to be constantly focusing on creating, like I've done at Hopium and Heather Cox Richardson and Midas Touch and Courier Newsroom and Brian Tyler Cohn and all these new alternative medias. I mean, think about your own information diet, right? I mean, how many of you were reading Substack 5 years ago, right? I mean, like 5 years ago. Now, Substack is for many people, it's the central way me and lots of others, right? There's lots of now, there's every cool kid's on Substack now, right? When I got on Substack 2.5 years ago, it was like, people were like, you're on what? Right? And it was sort of a weird thing, Substack. But we now have all of this access to pro-democracy media that we didn't have, but we need to keep growing it. You need to be an advocate to spread the organizations that you follow, to spread them through your own networks, to help create an amplifying effect for the stuff that we need to get out there, right? I mean, Trump is not only very loud and very manipulative of media, but we know they're putting tremendous pressure on the legacy media to sort of comply and bend the knee to him. And so the urgency of also creating these alternative vehicles, or the influencers, as was described earlier, there's tremendous urgency about this. And this is another part of something that you can do in the, like, what do I do, Simon, right? Well, you know, helping spread access and get more adherence to the media that you follow is another really important thing you can do. Did I cover most of your stuff? Okay, let me get to other questions. I know. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I just want to,
Hello.
hi. Two things, one positive and one negative. I'm totally with you in terms of the Democrats not attacking our own party, so, but there's one story in the last few days that's really bothered me, which is these PACs online that are raising tons of money and only returning about 1 to 5% to the Dems. So that's the negative. And I will just end with a positive. In researching, which is what I'm doing now, America's Democratic Civil Society, I found the most fabulous article, which I want to recommend to everyone. You've probably seen it in the New Republic, about the Big Ten schools, because it gives a counter narrative dramatically to the Harvard, Yale, you know. And I just want to recommend that. It's beautifully written. And so I'll end on an up note, but
Well, and let's talk about the spam packs, because I do think that this issue of, you know, 7 million people gave to Kamala Harris's campaign in 2024. And that number in 2016 was probably 3 million, right? So we've seen a huge increase in the number of people who are now part of our family, right? Who are very active in our family, right? And again, I still come back to the idea that I think that all of the power that we have is really about mobilizing those 7 million, which is something that we haven't really even begun to figure out how to do yet. But the way that all of the 7 million are spoken to by us is largely through all those horrible emails that you get, right? And it is a serious problem. And I've written about this, I've talked about this, I even had a meeting, I can talk about this now. I had a meeting with the entire senior team of the Harris campaign in late September of 2024, complaining about the way they were talking to people, because I felt that the constant barrage of fundraising emails and telling us that we were losing an election that we were winning at that time, and the polls were bad when they were good, that we were going to create demobilization in our family, and that they needed to lift people up and give them a sense that we've got a real shot here. And then I do believe, and I've said this publicly, that Kamala Harris came out of the convention roaring, right? We had the best convention that I've ever been to. We were raising tons of money. The crowds at the events were enormous. She was ahead in all the polls. She then kicked his ass in the debate, and she was in control of this race, right? We were strong and he was weak. We were winning, they were losing. And then she said, I'm the underdog in the race. And what she did is she gave away her power by doing that, because all Trump sees the world is through strong and weak, winning and losing, right? He's always the strong man and we're the weak people. He's winning and we're always losing. Because if you take away winning and losing from Trump, what is left is the ugliest political thing that we've all ever seen, right? And so I think the Harris campaign made a massive strategic error in the election by saying that she was the underdog for a biracial woman from Northern California to admit that he was strong and she was weak was enormously risky. And they did it because of the fundraising. They did it because the digital fundraisers believe that if donors think we're behind by a little bit and not ahead, they'll give more money. And I think the problem is that more than just, this elections are about more than raising money. So the communications pipeline between the national party and all of you go through what I call these feral Democratic fundraising people who are like, no one can control. They're like, animals out in the wilderness who are not been corralled into the broader political objective because all they want to do is raise money. And the fact that the political leadership of our party has ceded control of the communications channels to all of you, to, a handful of digital fundraising people, is something that I am fighting against really hard. And I have used up some of my internal political capital in the family about us trying to sort of take back control of that pipeline between all of you and the national party. But it's hard to believe we're even really talking about this, to be honest, right? It's such a sign, I'm being a little bit more perhaps blunt today than I normally am, but it's a sign of just incredible cowardice, frankly, of our Democratic leaders that they've not been willing to take control. And I will tell you that when I worked for Bill Clinton, I was the communications director at the DNC in 1993 when we won. And my job was to sell the Clinton agenda out through the Democratic Party stuff. And the fundraising people, the then direct mail, had messages that had nothing to do with Clintonism. It was just the way they always raised money. And I took control and changed the entire messaging of all of our direct mail to align with what Clinton's message was. And it was a really painful and difficult process, but it happened. But on your question, another aspect of the feral fundraising children, digital fundraising children in our family, is this mothership story that has been published by a professor at Stanford who's done research showing that these spam packs, you'll get texts or emails from some pack that usually has a blue in it or Democrat in it that you've never heard before, and telling you that if you rush $5 right now, there's like a $300 million match, and that, we got to, and I get all these, right? We all get all these, right? And this professor from Stanford figured out that one of these organizations called Mothership, which is a digital fundraising thing that feeds into the Democratic Party, through their spam packs raised $286 million, and 2 million of it, or 1.2 million of it, went to candidates. And the rest went to them. And they got wealthy. They're generationally wealthy now. And they fucked all the rest of us, right? And, this has to end. It just has to end. And one of the things in your calls to your leaders that you can make is you can demand that the kind of fundraising practices from Mothership and the other feral digital fundraising people have to end. Ken Martin and the DNC is very committed to doing everything they can. They don't have necessarily the power to regulate something like this. But, if you think about that $286 million and what CD2 Blue New Mexico could have done with a fraction of that, right? We're in a time of national crisis. Every dollar we spend has to be spent wisely and strategically. And this is an area that I've already been very involved in this. And I'm confident that the DNC is going to take a very strong stand on this in the coming weeks. And that if, for those of you who also give money, Act Blue, to their credit, which is the place that most of our digital money goes through, just came out with significant new reforms, that are going to make it much harder for this kind of activity. And so for all the questions around Act Blue, I want to just remind people, because this comes up in Hopium, those emails and the texts you get aren't coming from Act Blue. There are two ways they come to you, right? One is they come through these spam packs who buy lists and then solicit you. But the other is that campaigns sell their lists to make money. And it's usually the losing campaigns that sell their list to sort of if they have debt. And so this is not an easy thing to completely regulate. But I think the party is, in order to regain the trust of many of you who felt more distant from the party after the last election, there's a series of things we're going to need to do to regain trust. And reining in Mothership is going to be one of those things that we absolutely must do. Yeah, I can go to 3. Or I know by the way, Rachel's going to be amazing. Yep. Yeah, I can go to 3.
Those 3 and then.
Can I also say hello to the Lieutenant Governor, please? As I haven't had a chance to say her. She's
Can you
busy,
hear me?
but- Yeah.
I wanted to
Hey.
Shift.
Good to see you.
shift the dynamic away
Yep.
from self-critique because Democrats like to do that.
Yep.
And I think we got to remember whether it's the most conservative Democrat that lives in Roswell to the most liberal Democrat that lives down by the university, they're all Democrats. And we should not worry so much about the small differences.
Yep.
Because we're up against a big machine, huge, huge, huge machine. Fox News, Trump with him constantly talking, and I don't know how many billionaire fundraisers out there. So you need to recognize who you're up against, and they got a lot of money. And we have a president who has some type of mental condition where he talks constantly. He talks all day long. As much as I've read about it, he brings people in the Oval Office and he has a monologue with 20 people sitting there nodding like this, and he never asks the question, nor does he want any input from them. So he has logorrhea, I would say. I view Trump as a guy, goes to bed at night.
Ma'am, question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I got off on.
It's okay.
So I want to know what the Democratic Party will do about the logorrhea problem.
Yeah, look, I think it gets back to something I said earlier, is that part of what we've learned in this year is that the House and Senate are very old institutions, and they aren't really well equipped to be a communications counterbalance to Trump. In given Trump's constant putting stuff out there all the time, the reinforcement and amplification from Fox News, and that part of the way that I think we have to sort of acknowledge how we were unprepared was that we didn't really have, the House and Senate Democrats didn't really create, along with the DNC, some kind of huge communications vehicle where they were responding every day to Trump in a strategic way. And, you know, there have been calls for People's Cabinet and the war room and all these things. There have been all these ideas that have been kicked around, but, you know, I think that part of my, and I'm going to write about this for next week, and in my hike on the Dorothy Stewart Trail this morning in Santa Fe, I was thinking about this, is that I've called for there to be sort of a superstructure. I did this back in February and March, where the House and Senate Democrats, along with the DNC and the DGA and the DSCC and all the, create some kind of more a vehicle for them to organize themselves better to fight against Trump's information dominance. And I think now that it has to happen. I don't think we really have any choice any longer. I think the last month that there was no kind of, I mean, what I had called for before was every time we go on recess, the leadership should stay open. You can rotate different senators through, like on Tuesday, it could be, you know, one of your senators, on Wednesday, it could be another senator, but that there would be somebody responding officially, right, for the Senate and House and Democratic leadership against what Trump was doing that day. So we were getting into the stories, creating counterbalance and all that stuff. And that just isn't happening. And I think it now has to happen. I don't think, like, there can't really be a debate about this any longer. And because we just had a month where we were essentially down and he continued to have this incredible information dominance. The good news is that Trump's poll numbers continue to decline, right? I mean, in the Economist YouGov weekly tracking poll, which is among the most credible regular tracking polls this week, he was at 40-56 approval, which was the worst of his second term. So he's done all these things, right? He keeps doing everything he keeps doing, this sort of spastic, wild things that he does, keeps driving his numbers down. And he keeps getting more and more distant from the American people. And as I was saying, that then creates this need for him to create even more spectacular, right? So we're in this crazy kind of dynamic, right? And so I do think, I want to get to other questions, that I do think that as among the things that you can be calling these offices for, and as in the theory of not being critical, but of helping our leaders understand what's expected of them now, is the line that we use, which is a gentle way of urging them to do certain things, right? Is that, you know, they have to figure out a way to create more daily pushback and engagement. And I think that I think this has been hard. I'm going to say to you, I think this has been hard because these offices don't have the 20 communication staff that are sitting in the White House, right? They aren't built to be responding 24/7, 365. And it's why we have to build a new thing. Like the thing, we don't have, what we have is inadequate, and we have to go build a new thing. And we have to get serious about this. Because I think if my message to you today, if there's one overarching message, is that he's weakening, he's losing, his powers are ebbing, but he's growing wilder and more ambitious and more dangerous. And that these things are related, right? And it means that as he escalates, we have to continue to raise our game and find a higher gear. And that's really the urgent task, I think, for Democrats in the coming months. I know there are two more, I think.
My question is about a report I read today that one of the things that's happening nationally is there are more Republicans, more people that are registering as Republicans than as Democrats. And so do you address that,
Yes,
please?
thank you. So this is something I've worked on quite a bit. That New York Times report that which came out 2 days ago, the basis of that was research by a guy named Tom Bonnier, who's sort of a guy that I partner with and do a lot of work with. So what's happened is, and this is a great question, and I'm sorry I didn't bring this up earlier, because it gets to another do thing that we can do. 20 years ago, when McCain-Feingold was passed, which then limited the amount of money that political parties could raise, what happened was that there became a huge structural effort inside the Democratic Party to move party activities to 501c3s and C4s that could take unlimited contributions. And so we moved voter registration out of the party and into 501c3s and C4s. We moved redistricting work out of the main party. So the party, because of the change in campaign finance laws, sort of shed some of its core activities that it always had, to pragmatically, because Republicans at that point always had much more money than we did. So this was a pragmatic set of decisions to try to husband the hard dollars that are harder to raise in smaller amounts, and to let the wealthy donors sort of fund these things outside. The problem is 20 years later that we lost, and if any of you have done voter registration work, you've often said, listen, we just want you to register and vote. We don't care what party you register for, right? We've all done that, right? We've all been part of that. That was a mistake. That was a big mistake. And so, because what it meant was, in that initial handshake with an infrequent voter, or a voter that's getting registered by CD2 Blue New Mexico, or a young person registering for the first time, we were not saying as a national party that we want you to be part of our team. It is important to us that you're part of our team and that you're with us and that we want you to come in. So this initial interaction with us was loose and not hard. It was a loose handshake. It was not a hard handshake, right? We didn't grab somebody and say, come on into our family. There's some guys next door. Okay, that's fun. Rachel, you're gonna have to speak really loud, and which she can do. But so what's happened is that between 2020 and 2024, the Republicans spent a lot of money on partisan voter registration. And in Tom Bonnier's report, which you can find on my site and watch it, he has all the data, about this. It made, in all the battleground states that we just lost, it made all of them more Republican than they were 4 years ago. And it's another reason. Look, every win, there's 1,000 fathers or whatever that line is, and there's 1,000 fathers of a loss. But a significant reason we lost this election was because they made the electorates in these battleground states much more Republican than they were before. And, you know, some of us knew about this and were raising the alarm about this. The National Party did not have any kind of strategy to deal with this. Ken Martin and the new team at the DNC is making partisan voter registration a priority for the party for the first time since 2004. Yeah, and I have been working with them on this, and you know, Ken Martin is investing more money in state parties than anyone has ever invested before. And they're giving red states more money than blue states. And this is important, right? Because we have to learn how to win in more red states and red places, like CD2, which used to be red and now it's blue, right? Is that we have to learn how to win in more red states and red places in order to get back the majority. So part of that money that's going to the state parties is a requirement and an expectation that they're going to launch partisan voter registration drives. So one of the things that you can do for the New Mexico Democratic Party is that you can call them on Monday, right, and say, hi, when you launch your partisan voter registration drives, which I know you're going to do, sign me up and have me become a volunteer and help them, right? Because many of these state parties have never done this before, and because this has been done by other people. So, but this is a major priority now for the National Party, and we know this is a problem. That data that was in the New York Times came from us, right? That was our research that's inside the party, right? That I did an entire event on, 2 months ago. And there is an actual initial set of solutions. But we have to recognize is that, the Turning Point organization, which we kind of mocked and made fun of, registered a lot of young people to be Republican, and they have as much money so they're continuing to register. And this is an urgent task in front of us. And frankly, all of you can play a role in dealing with it, either through CD2 or through the party. And I want to say also, for those of you who don't know Ken Martin, the new DNC chair, he's not a flashy guy. He's a good Midwestern, party chair. He's a very competent guy. He ran a state party for 14 years. Think of him as the CEO of the Democratic Party or the COO, right? He doesn't have to be the spokesperson. We have 30 great spokespeople. Ken knows how to run a party. And the new regime that's in place there, they're like turning around a battleship, right? And it's going to take a little while. This is like a 4 to 6 year turnaround. And while at the same time, no one is feeling any kind of patience, for what there's tremendous pressure on them to produce now. When they inherited, when Ken came in, the DNC usually has 600 staff. There were 100 people at the DNC. And so, they were very limited in capacity. And I'm optimistic that he's got a very strong plan. And is consistent with the view today, the discussion, we should be helping them achieve that plan and lifting them up instead of tearing them down, in my view. One last question.
Me. This isn't really a question, so I'll make it very fast because it's something I'm hoping that you can promote through Hopium. There's a guy named Ben Boardman who calls himself Barn Owl. He's in Wisconsin, and he has this, what I consider a really great idea. I work with Blue CD2. I'm a treasurer and almost the co-chair. Because we have been struggling with how we can get messages to communities that really don't have newspapers, and may not take an op-ed or something, if whatever. Anyway, he buys column inches in Shoppers. So it's an ad, and everybody in these little towns reads these Shoppers, and he takes an ad out. There's the one that I saw is on how our kids are getting less to eat because of them. And he explains it. And, he is not saying ain't it awful so much. He doesn't have any action item, but one could have action items in there. And as a little, we're really interested in it because we haven't really gotten to figure out how we can get down to those little towns on paper and get something in front of everybody's eyes. But they're cheap and they're very interested in ads.
Lynn,
So
let me just 2 minutes to build on that and I'll close. Yeah, I'm going to close. I think that one of the things that makes me optimistic about this moment is that we have a chance to go build a new thing. What we had before was insufficient for the moment in time. And this is a time for all of you, as you think again about this issue of how you express yourself in the world to your networks and your communities, is I think that lifting up people who are innovating, like this amazing organization, it's why I'm here today, that we have to build an experiment and test and find new ways to do old work. And that's what makes this part of this moment so exciting, right? Is that we're not executing off an old plan. We got to go build a new one. We got to be path breakers here and find new ways of doing this old work. And lifting up those organizations and those people like this guy, Barn Owl, right? I guess his name is, or CD2 Blue New Mexico, is really important. Did I get it right? I'm sorry if I didn't. Yeah, Blue CD2 New Mexico is really important because the way that we're going to get through this is we have to innovate. We have to find a higher gear. We have to continually be doing these old things in new ways in order for us to be successful. And so it's really an honor to be here with all of you. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I want to remind everyone that these coming elections this fall are really important. Try to play a role in whatever way you can in helping us have big victories in New Jersey and in Virginia that will send a clear signal of rejection to Trump. Because that's the other thing that I just want to close with, is that we have to continue to grow this circle of defiance against him. We have to imagine our movement as having not just people in traditional politics, but universities, right? And businesses that have been harmed by the tariffs, and farmers who are struggling because of their policies, hospitals in New Mexico. This anti-Trump movement, we have to expand our imagination about what this movement is and who's part of it, because we have to make it as big as possible in order to preserve our democracy and to give our kids and our grandkids the futures that they deserve. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. And
if you all can stand and give Simon a standing ovation, it also gives you a chance to stand before the next speaker. Thank you. Hey, Rachel Bitecofer, who I've gotten the pleasure of, like Simon Rosenberg, thank you, to be on an online virtual call with. So Rachel is a political scientist and election forecaster, has become a sought-after political speaker. Her interviews and analysis have been featured by the New York Times, the Washington Post, Salon, Politico, and many other prominent news sources. In her latest book, which I got before and bought again, Hit 'em Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game. Don't you love that title? Hit 'em Where It Hurts. Rachel argues that to beat Republicans, Democrats must use negative partisanship that relies on one message to drive strong turnout for the party, while simultaneously pushing swing voters away from voting for Republicans. Rachel is my hero, my heroine, my shero, because she's not a people pleaser the way I am. She's going to tell it like it is and fight fire with fire and kick butt. So I present to you Rachel Bitecofer.
So cool, dude. Yeah, I'm so honored to be here. I'm going to tell you, Simon and I are both we're all living through this moment. It weighs really heavy. And I know he's 24/7, 7 days a week, no summer break, just like me. So it's been a tough month, especially if you've been telling people this month was coming for 10 years, right? So anyway, I'm excited that he was here and able to talk a little bit about the progress the party is making. I'm going to give a presentation tomorrow about negative partisanship strategy, but this is my first round trip. And
I almost like wanted to cry sitting and watching Blue CD2's demonstration of their messaging and their approach and everything. Cause it was like, oh my God, I said, go do this thing. And someone went and did this thing and they did it so well, right? Like I've not been back around to a lot of the places I've been to see it taken and to flourish in such a way. And I got to tell you, I'm a statistician by living. It's very hard to even get a 15% response rate on shit. Okay. So like if you're getting 50% of your targeted 40K out, like that's pretty good. And it's a great investment for your money. We all have that fundraising issue going on that we're working on in the party to try to cramp down on that, because you know, I started this effort knowing I was an outsider to the party as an election professor, as a researcher, as a pollster and an analyst. And you know, you are out of politics. Like you're not, I didn't come up in a farm system like Simon did, right? So I knew it was going to be difficult to get the party to do these things, also for many other reasons that we can talk about tomorrow. But so I thought, okay, I'll build a super PAC. That's what I'll do. Sure, I come from the working class and don't know a single rich person, but I will build a super PAC so we don't so that we at least one entity will go into Virginia in 2021. We'll go in this map in 2022 and just napalm the living shit out of the Republican Party, right? Because I knew that there would be no entity controlled by the current people in the Democratic Party that would do that, okay? Because the donors don't want to, nobody wants to do negative, right? And so, you know, I quickly figured out I couldn't raise enough money. And I could have gone on for years, though. I could have gone on, you know, and you know, put shit out on social media and taken your money that was basically repurposed back into making more money. But I clearly, like, that's not what I'm doing, right? So I left the idea of super PACing behind and really started to develop a relationship with the old chair, Jamie Harrison, and the new chair, Ken Martin, who's come in and, you know, built the war room that I've been asking for 5 years. I mean, a lot of people don't know what the DNC is doing, and the DNC is kind of like the go all target for angst. It's the party, it's the party, it's the party. Well, as Simon was talking about, one of my arguments is that we need an institution that coordinates the messaging and strategy for all of these, you know, CCC, you got the DGA, you got the DSC, right? You got all of these organizations, and then within them, you have each candidate who kind of has their own consultant team, and the candidates can only do what the consultants tell them to do. They are relying on the consultant's expertise to tell them how to win, right? So we have this problem where, you know, there's so much not just bifurcation, it's multifurcation of effort, duplicity of effort, no one message like they do, with which I highlight in the book with CRT. And, you know, it's so important that we get that institution. So I'm glad Simon's working on it too and talking to Ken, but I really want everyone to know what the DNC has done. They've started a war room. It has a 4-pillar strategic approach that you can see and read about in the Washington Post, the Hill, or on the Democratic Party's website. And that is, you know, dealing with a lot of stuff, but also dealing with the problem of amplification and narrative control, which is going to be so important. So anyway, I am excited to be here. I'm really excited to point out some of that messaging that we saw when I talk about negative partisanship. And tomorrow I'm going to show you on a slide, but today, I mean, I'll just kind of tell you again, negative partisan. If you think about partisanship, like, why are we Democrats? Well, we care about others. We want the environment to be clean. We want our children to have good educations. We know rich people don't have our back, right? There's like reasons that we are Democrats, and that's what our positive partisanship is. It's rooted there. But our negative partisanship is rooted in, because we have a 2-party system and can have an opposite, right, is rooted in the fear and the threat and the distrust that partisans feel about the other partisans, okay? And that's always been a factor, but it became a very big factor once the Republican Party discovered the power of that in terms of persuasion and altered their persuasion politics to be this brand warfare that I lay out and have been advocating the parties switching to. It's exciting to see those postcards. I said, you know, you should tell young men they're not going to have sex. Okay. And you guys aren't the first organization to have done it. Everywhere that did it, it tested like that. And like, it's been really hard for me to get people to test negative partisanship, but then you see these crazy effect signs, right? And it's just absolutely like full circle for me. And it also affirms something about myself that I thought, you know, I'm really good at recognizing talent. Damn, I am really good at recognizing talent, because you ladies have built an incredible, scalable, really clear, you know, campaign model for people to take and run. And I hope we can include Montana in your list real soon, because this would be perfect there. And it was so funny because I was in the bathroom thinking, oh, you know, what we got to do is figure out how to get these guys to, you know, scale up to some of these other rural states, especially with big CDs, right? And there you go. Next slide was all about it, right? Anyway, tomorrow I'm going to talk about more specifically something that we don't ever talk about, which is how important partisanship is to vote choice, that it's important for actually almost the entire electorate, because most independents will admit to a pollster like me that they lean left or right. And their behavior is so similar to partisans, to people who are willing to say, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, that when we do our polling analytics now, we dump those leaners into the partisan baskets because they aren't behaving like the swing bucket, okay? And when we get down to that chopped swing bucket, we're talking about less than 10% of any competitive electorate, right? And what Republicans figured out was that it was a lot easier in a two-product system. And by the way, we're not selling Toyotas here, okay? We're selling a product that pretty much every American is raised to hate. When we look at why we're in this crisis moment, right? It's 100 years of shitty civic political culture where we teach people politics is dirty. You're actually morally superior if you don't do it. I'm sure you've met people who are like, oh, I don't do any of that, right? And like, you'd be embarrassed about a Peloton workout, but they're proud that they don't vote because it's so gross, right? So we, you know, have this problem where we don't have a full grasp on what people are you know, doing and thinking. We have our own thoughts that all these other things matter, but when we look in the data, it is election after election after election after election clear, to all the way back to when I was doing my dissertation on polarization, right? And before, it's about 95%. So 95% of people who say they're Republicans or lean Republican are going to vote for Trump, or they're going to vote for JD Vance, or they're going to vote for whoever the Republican is, Mike Johnson. And then you got about 10% that you can convince. And because we have a product no one wants to buy, kind of, it's a lot harder to sell it on its virtues. And they figured that out with Swift Votes for Veterans for Truth, if you will remember. That was the first time that somebody took a smear campaign to the persuadable bucket. And what they learned was, wow, that works great. And so they perfected it in 2010 and started, I mean, now what they're running is so well oiled and well heeled. We're in a real pickle, right? So I hope that you guys will consider getting a copy of the book. You can buy one, you can borrow one, you can steal one. They have them at the library. I don't care. Like, I'll give you one if that's what it takes, because it's so important that you read it. And I want to give you some confidence about the future, because it is such a dark time, and tell you that when Ken Martin read that book, he was still the Associated Democratic Chair Association Committee guy, the guy that coordinated the 57 state different party organizations. And there's 57 because states and territories, okay? And he called me on the phone. I got Jamie to pass the book to him. Jamie, who, by the way, Harrison, did a lot of good change at the DNC, but it was all buried because we were in power and not out of power. And that hurts. And when you're in power in the DNC, you don't lead the party, okay? The White House leads the party, and you're very limited by what you can do in terms of reform. So I want to be clear about that. But with Ken, he doesn't have those limitations. In fact, we're at a moment where Simon has come to, okay, man, we
right? Like he's not a hope guy is wanting to get me now, right? So, I hope that you guys will consider reading the book. I don't have time in a lecture or a speech tomorrow to really lay out all the things in the book, but the front half of it explains some terrible, horrible, no good, very true facts about the clay that we're working with in terms of the electorate, what it knows. We all know our state senators or our senators. Like normal people don't know who their senators are, okay? And one part of my job is getting people who are really, really wonky and have been in the DC world where you could maybe go into a coffee shop and have a conversation about Mike Johnson taking 5 votes to become speaker, but in real, like normal places, not LA, not DC, not New York, like that you go into the grocery store and I walked up to this dude and I'm like, hey dude, did you see that speaker vote? He'd be like, what the hell is this lady talking about, right? Like if I said, what about Mike Johnson? He'd probably be like, is that an NFL star, right? Like we think everyone has our context. No one has our context. And it's the most important lesson in the book is that because of that, partisanship is the be all end all. And what they have done with that is shit on our brand cycle after cycle after cycle. And we do what we do. Positive campaigns about what we're going to do for people and our biographies about being a fighter pilot or a sheriff in Florida or whatever it was. And that it doesn't work. It will always test well in a lab, but when it gets into that sound machine and the other side is she's a socialist who wants to cut your child's genitalia off, which is where they're at. This is where they're at on their messaging, okay? Like I just want you to tell the truth. You don't have to be doing things like that, but we do have to understand these people we're talking to when we register to them to vote. We have to sell our brand and shit on their brand. And we have to be doing both of those things all of the time, even if it's very hard for us to do that as liberal Democrats who are intellectually fact and reason logic-based creatures. And so we really can talk a lot about the structure changes, and Simon spent a good time doing that. But ultimately, we have a behavioral problem. The behavioral problem is us, okay? We can't be worried about winning the right way. The Republican Party doesn't sit down and figure out how to win, but win nicely in the right way and with ethics and all this bullshit we do. Okay, they just sit down and like, how do we optimize the probability of winning? And some dude tells Glenn Youngkin, who is the Virginia governor, Republican, flip the blue state red, hey, Glenn, we know your background is business and you're a successful business guy. And if he was our guy, what would we do? We'd be like, look at Glenn Youngkin. He's such a success. He's built this, he's done this, and blah, blah, blah. Well, Glenn, we think we can flip this long shot race if we all wedge race. And what we're going to do, the message is CRT. It doesn't matter if you don't know what it is, because what it meant to the recipients of that campaign was that they want to make you feel bad about being white. They want to make your kids feel bad about being white, right? And Glenn Youngkin ran on that. And all of the state House of Delegate candidates ran on that. And they wedged it. And what did we do? We played defense the whole time. We did exactly what they wanted us to do. We spent all of October talking about some shit that doesn't even exist. Okay, defending it, explaining it. It doesn't exist. It means this. It's going here. It's going there. And what we should have been doing is telling people Glenn Youngkin is going to steal all your money, right? And we should have been doing that very aggressively. So that's what my work is about. You'll get into some more detail in that lecture tomorrow. I have some data I want to show you guys. We don't have to guess at what happened or what we did wrong. We know what we did wrong. We have the data, and I'm going to explain that tomorrow. So I'm going to leave it open to questions for now. Ooh, I see a hand. Cool, but I guess we have time for 3. So let's try to make sure they're good. They're question oriented. Okay. Yes.
So what you were talking about is kind of like Lincoln Project,
Yes.
or all the pedophiles in the Republican Party is Russian party too.
Yeah,
but,
it's a Russian
but
party
yeah,
too.
if we bring up that,
Yep.
all the pedophiles alone,
Yep. I mean, Epstein is his most, until and unless he collapses the economy,
Yeah.
the only thing that he's weak on is Epstein. Yeah, I know it seems so superfluous and stupid to you, and it is, because it is. It's stupid. Okay. I mean, yes, these victims got screwed and, blah, blah, blah. But this is an issue that they have used for 4 years to call us pedophiles. And I get called a pedophile about 15,000 times a day. And I'm sure Simon does as well. Anybody who's engaging in MAGA is going to be called a pedophile, right? So, yeah, so it is like Lincoln Project. I was on the board of Lincoln when it launched. I was very excited about Lincoln Project, and that's why I started Strike Back. I was like, well, ultimately, there's going to be some people who look at these ex-Republicans, especially Rick, my buddy Rick Wilson, because he, slammed really hard a veteran with no legs in Georgia and flipped a Senate seat back when they were developing this strategy. Rick knows this shit works. The reason why Michael Stoyle is such a big fan of this work is that Republicans in my orbit all know this stuff works, and they call me still and they're like, what's going on? Like, why aren't they listening to you? And that's why I'm more focused now on trying to convey to us, like, no, like, we can't do this unless we commit to doing it. And what I'm asking you to do is be mean. Okay. I'm asking you just to be an asshole for democracy. I'm not asking you, we could be asking ourselves much tougher questions in a year's time. Like, should I hide this, dreamer who's never been to El Salvador a day in his life and was brought here at 2 in my attic, even though I'm risking, having Pam Bondi come to my house, right? That's the kind of shit that we're going to be sitting around thinking about. And then a lot of people in DC are thinking about right now, especially John Bolton, right? So we have no more time, as Simon has said. And I'm glad that you put that together, because yes, what I'm trying to do is Lincoln Party, the Democratic Party, tone, tenor, a little bit more serious, lots less money wasted on other shit. Just, I want to distribute message digitally and on TV. I don't want to fundraise. I want to spend money, 90% of every dollar on message distribution that's brand warfare work. And, it's hard to, that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Can we talk about Gaza in our party? I am so distressed. We see our people, the public is so distressed, and the Democrats are taking money and they will not take a stand. Can we do anything about that?
No, the ship has sailed. I mean, Gaza was sentenced to death the day that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. I hate to say that, but it's true. And he said it right out. I'm going to raise Gaza and I'm going to put a Trump Tower in it. He literally said those words. Oh, he must be joking, right? Well, he's not joking. And Netanyahu, the only thing that held him, I mean, I know it seemed horrible what was coming out on the news blast. You think what was bad happening under Joe? It's much worse now today. They're literally starving Gaza out, and he has no reason to comply because there's no American pressure in Donald Trump. Joe Biden, for all the things that you guys want to point at that were inadequate in those months of the response, always held Netanyahu back. Okay. Well, he doesn't have that anymore. So, I think people need to really focus domestically on what's happening with the Republican Party and not this internal fight about the Middle East. Because I'm telling you now, and I've been right for 10 years, okay? They are rounding up people, kidnapping Latino-looking citizens off the streets, guys, okay? We got our own problems here. We can't help anybody overseas if we let America fall into fascism, and I am mission-focused on that. Yeah. Was there one more? I thought there was one more. No. Oh, well, there you go. Hey. Yeah, that's fine. Are you going to rub my shoulders while you stand there?
Oh, God. But I'm gonna have you be with me to the very end.
Okay, I'll be with you to the very end, dude. I'll be with all of you to the very end. Okay, because over my cold, dead body will these fascists steal this country from us.
Amen.
Right? Over my cold, dead body. Yep.
Rachel, what can we do every day to get that message out, and where is it going to be coming from? Where should we look and how do we get it out?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the models for the messaging, I think they're getting out there now, but there's still not a lot to look at, right? I mean, you can look at what these guys did on those postcards is what I've asked grassroots postcarders to do for 5 years. It was the first time I've ever seen anything that has been what I would call hit them where it hurts principled. Not just on the fact that it was all about negative partisanship. The messages were, they're coming for this, they're coming for that, loss aversion, right? And they're coming for you, not necessarily others, because unfortunately for us, we're the only people who give a fuck about other people. Other people don't care about other people. They only care about themselves. And that's just a human trait. And even us, even though we care more about other people, still we're human beings. We're not special. Okay. We're not unicorns. We're liberals. We have a more collective bent, a more empathetic approach, and certainly more science and logic at this point with the party realignment, but we are still human beings. And so what you need to say to people is, hey, did you hear that Trump's going to purge all the museums, including the Smithsonian? Because when I tell my rando, I have people I focus group, like out in the world, right? I mean, focus groups of 12, 30, or 1 rando out in the street. They're all scientifically they're not samples, okay? They mean nothing. They mean about what the opinions of that one group meant. So I focus group a lot of people, and I ask them what they know. They don't know any of this stuff. How can you have the pit? Do you guys have the pit? Because I have the pit. I go to bed at night with a pit in my stomach, and I wake up with a pit in my stomach, and then I just saddle up and say, okay, I'm gonna go fight some Nazis on Twitter for a while, right? Well, the problem is there's a whole bunch of good Americans, good people who believe in immigration, who believe in racial equality, who don't have that pit because they do not watch any news and they don't know who their senators are. And that's where we have to focus. We have to focus on spreading the pit.
Stay right here. So Rachel, thank you so much. I'm going to keep Rachel up here because I am going to ask you to stand, but not to the very end. You can't stand until it's time to. One more, Sally.
Hey, I get an encore.
An encore.
Nice. I gave up going to Billy Strings to come down here this weekend. So, man, so the sacrifice in Eugene, dude. It would have been awesome. Anyway, here I am.
Yeah, back to Simon's point about dominance politics,
Yes.
which is what this is about.
That's what-
And certainly in the culture,
Yeah.
that seems to be the culture war, Cracker Barrel,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. How do we all become Gavin Newsoms? How do we make our politicians all become Gavin Newsom?
Making the politicians part has been a lot harder. Trust me, I've been working very hard on it for 5 years. But in terms of for you, the good thing is the front half of the book lays out the why. Why are we doing it wrong? How our issues are not up here. It's not, shared race class narrative or this or that or whatever. Our issues in terms of winning elections are down here in the soil and the roots, because we are operating on the two assumptions of the electorate that are blatantly false. One, that it's informed and engaged. Okay. It is neither. And two, that partisanship isn't the be all end all, right? We hear, well, black voters and white voters and rural voters and educated voters. That shit is interesting to me when I'm modeling a regression model because I have to control for it. But if I model what made somebody vote for a Republican or a Democrat, basically 40% of the model is explained alone by partisanship. And if anyone knows numbers in this building, 40% of variance from one variable is astounding explanatory power. And yet, if you look at what we've done, especially as this realignment has happened in rural, especially with white working class people, what we've done is like, okay, when we're not really Democrats, we'll just hide that we're Democrats. I'll go to the door and I'll have this conversation about things that we have in common, and we're gonna have this great conversation. And I'm here to tell you that person may even say to you, I'm gonna vote for you, but the data don't lie, okay? They're voting for the D and the R. And unless you're Mark Kelly or Barack Obama, generally speaking, that D and the R is the most important thing on the ballot. I know that's hard to hear for candidates especially, but that D and the R is the most important thing, and we have done an election system that completely ignores it.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Yay, clap, clap, clap. Thanks. So we're gonna give the chance to give a standing ovation to Rachel because she deserves that for sure. And what we're gonna do is we're now completing. So one, I want to thank all of you for your fundraising, your contributions, for making a difference. And I'd like those who were co-hosts, Kate and Ellen, you're here, for Nancy, your sister, and everybody who's a Blue CD2 volunteer, who are the leaders, like Sally, who just asked a question. Marty, can you all stand so that we can applaud you and everything that you've been doing for Blue CD2 and impacting these incredible results that have happened? It's been amazing. So since we've been here, I said, like, I don't know, it was like 40 minutes ago or something, that we were at 14,000, and then like 20 minutes ago, 650 was raised. So we're, I think, at 14,650 toward the $15,000 goal. So remember, you all have already been so generous, but for $25 more.
My demonstrator.
Okay, and with this QR code and $25 more, you can, I feel like I'm a used car salesman. You can get one of these bags that are in the back, or you could have the mug with $25 more. And you will probably get us up to 15,000. Okay. So the other thing is, if you want to volunteer, if you want to contribute like Craig, my husband, and I do, if you want to fundraise like I do, if you want to hold a house party like Marty is helping with a hybrid party on September 11th in Santa Fe, so you can get on by Zoom and go there in person. Her friends, because of how dedicated she is, that even over the holidays and when she's vacationing, they see her on calls and doing emails with Blue CD2. It inspired them so much. They had never contributed before. They gave $25,000 to Blue CD2 New Mexico. So that could be your friend. That could be you. And if you go to the registration desk, you can take one of the business cards for Blue CD2. Whatever you'd like to do postcards, which I also do. You can be part of this team to get out the word and to make sure that Montana, plus 7 other states who already have been asking for our work, that we are able to be there. So before, you all have also pens on the table, and Rachel will be staying here with your book. You can have her sign it and, say something great in your book and personalize it to you. Oh, let's get selfies for sure. And I just want to end today. We're all doing everything that we can to keep ourselves inspired. And sometimes I feel like I want to be in the fetal position. But the thing that I do, among many things, but when I wake up in the morning, I look at the quote of the day, which is called the Word of the Day, from www.gratefulness.org, a network for grateful living, just to inspire my brain to keep going and to keep fighting the fight and to keep doing the work that we're doing. And today, which always happens, it's so weird, Martin Luther King Jr., the quote from today was, "But I know somehow that only when it's dark enough can you see the stars." So again, this quote, "But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars." Martin Luther King Jr. So please, a standing ovation for all of us and for Rachel for making a difference with this work. Thank you so much for all that you've done today. We appreciate you. Keep eating, keep drinking. Have Rachel over at the edge over here. Our video is off. It'll be edited. You all will get a thank you next week with the video. So thank you for being here.